So bank acquires the property, then it gets hashed to HBAR, and then it could possibly be tokenized on XRP, and then it's traded globally. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how real-world assets will be run on hybrid networks, how HBAR already has a few hybrid networks, and how some of these networks are run with AI finance, and how XRP holds about 63% of all tokenized US Treasuries. And I also built a real-world asset simulator showcasing how HBAR will have these private networks. Stay tuned. So Hedera's institutional grade infrastructure, a 2026 launchpad for real world assets and AI driven finance. And when you hear this stuff, I want you to think of they're trying to build out the system for themselves so they can do transactions over here in their private network to then push it to the public HBAR network. And so essentially $10 billion of real world asset settlements is going to be on a hybrid network architecture. They're calling this the trust layer. And essentially, this is for the big players who are going to come in and say, hey, we want to do commercial real estate like I talked about in the past. And how they're going to do it, they're going to call it this trust layer. And when you hear trust layer, I want you to think of their own system, their own blockchain to then push to HBAR. Governments tested central bank digital currency and national registries on HBAR. Global banks settled real collateral on-chain, and they adopted hybrid networks through HashSphere. And who is HashSphere? This is the company that is providing private networks for HBAR. Really want you to understand the reason behind this is because they're trying to protect customer information. They don't want the ability for, if there's a big trade order coming on the trading floor to then buy this real world asset that's represented as a token, you need a private network to basically protect themselves from scalpers or even their competitors knowing what they're buying in this new system. So it makes sense to build this trust layer, but it's more for institutions to protect themselves. So leverage HBAR's institutional grade technology while ensuring your transactions are private and secure. So yeah, going back to this is the rationale is for privacy, and it's not just for speed. I mean, yes, speed is nice, but they need a way to protect themselves so that when they tokenize things, it's in their own little box so that potentially auditors can then look in their balance sheet. But I think they're using HBAR as like, hey, this is a lot easier to then stand up. There's already a standard in there. They control the regulating body. It's a lot easier to then go to a company like HashSphere, partner with maybe like Control Alts to then tokenize some of your assets and move them on their private network and then link them to HBAR. So I wanted to show you this graphic because real world assets can be represented as really anything. But right now, Treasuries is really important, especially with the issuance of new debt and minting these stable coins. So XRP holds about 63% of tokenized US Treasuries. And it is worth noting that most of these treasuries are being sold and exchanged, and maybe the word is traded on other networks like Ethereum, Stellar, and Arbitrum. And so it still gets issued on the XRP Ledger, but it's being traded with Ethereum and Arbitrum. So the rationale behind that is Ethereum has the ability for when you transfer or you execute a trade, you can then run code after that trade. And so it supports the hybrid model approach that I've been talking about with HBAR. And so you'll need these supporting networks like Ethereum and Arbitrum to then help XRP, maybe not HBAR, but help these like massive settlement vehicles. But you'll need like the tools like Flare and Ethereum to help you with these real world assets. So I wanted to show you my hybrid RWA simulator. This is for HBAR and XRP. And my focus is just real estate and treasuries right now. And there's a lot of focus in the community for R3 Corda. But essentially R3 Corda was, in my opinion, first to market. They're basically backed by the banks right now. So they have probably a whole team of developers that are working with the banks. And there's a lot of banks. So I can't imagine that they're very focused on what they want. Part of the reason why I don't think they're as relevant as people think they are, they just probably have a lot of requirements from different partners of different banks. And when you have that many leaders pushing the direction, I don't think there's a clear consensus. I personally like banks having control of their own blockchain or their own little private network, because they're going to have a targeted approach for how they handle real world assets for their own balance sheet. So that makes a lot of sense to me, rather than kind of like a global network like R3 Corda. I think that's more of a petri dish to kind of show them, hey, this is how it could work. And then they'll probably take that type of framework and move it towards their own development team. So as a reminder, they're developing private networks, and we know this from even Red Swan. They have their own little ecosystem, and XRP has that with Control Alt. So they are taking this outside of the public blockchain, but they're minting it with the public blockchain. So let me explain this. So let's say real estate. So bank acquires a property, then it gets hashed to HBAR, and then it could possibly be tokenized on XRP, and then it's traded globally. But what I think what might happen, and what is happening, like you need, for example, the property address, the know your customer, the internal validations, and even like the bank's portfolio, all that needs to be handled privately. And so that's why we're seeing a rise of these private networks all across the board, because purchase price, brokerage fees, everything that you need to then handle a transaction that could possibly be living on HBAR. But you need the global credibility, the system behind it for the validity, like I've been talking about, how when you tokenize something, the validity of that token is the system that they choose. And that system could be XRP or HBAR. So I want to show you this. The global market is part of their marketing is, hey, we could potentially serve a global market with real estate and these new tokens that they're creating. And so what I wanted to show you was, okay, let's say we took a $650 million commercial property. And the goal of that is to fractionalize it, as I talked in my last video, fractionalize it so I could take a portion of that and take, let's say 40%, because I might not have all the funding I need from a private investor. I then could democratize it to as many token holders as I want. Now, the potential price of a $650 million property could be $12,000 per token holder. And so people like you and me could potentially buy that token and say, hey, I could be involved in real estate, for example, like in Dubai, like they're doing now. And also the rationale might be to then earn yield from this type of token. So let's say they have office space in there and they're earning basically rents. You then can give the profit to the token holders. So back to the privacy of these tokens, not everybody is going to want to know who owns what type of commercial property. And so you're going to need private settlement like HBAR to develop HashSphere for their private networks for these banks. R3 Corda with XRP and even Solana help pave the way, but the world will be able to access this global market, but there's going to be like silos of private networks to protect the banks and the people settling these trades. So speaking of systems that live on the blockchain, you also live on the blockchain and you can be part of this new system. I created WhatISupport to help facilitate trades. And so what I did was I built a system that lets you share your profile to your friends. And then an easier way to do it is with your WhatISupport Black Card. And so it's a laser etched card with an NFC tag of that profile, and I create them in-house. I'm going to be doing